Welcome to Slay the Spire vs. Across the Obelisk, but not really, where we compare the dark souls of deck-building roguelikes, and what kind of self-respecting roguelike player would make a series on those without talking about the actual deck building first. I'm going to get this out of the way now, as it is an essential aspect to my outlook on both games. STS emphasizes adaptability, the ability to grab a mixture of bad, average, and good stuff, then make something formidable out of it. Playing STS is like being Tony Stark and building your first Iron Man suit from scraps in a cave, only to further improve your subsequent creations with more combinations and innovative synergies until committing war crimes becomes a Tuesday for you. On the other hand, ATO is a game that emphasizes preparation. Luck seldom plays a factor, and it ultimately comes down to the player to assemble a roguelike equivalent of the Avengers, carefully crafting a combination of mighty synergies and gear only to die to the first boss because they brought a pure bleed comp to the bleed immune enemy. You're crafting your team with about as much care as Time Eater ruining your fun, or indie devs making the best music, or Dreamsight making sure Thule stays bottom tier. Now mind you, this isn't to say STS has no preparation or that ATO has no improvising, but I think it's clear cut which game's focus is what. Keep that in mind from here on out, we'll come back to it frequently during this series. Now on to the fun stuff. Cards. Cards, man. Cards everywhere. Right off the bat, the first thing to notice is that cards by themselves in ATO feel a lot weaker in comparison to STS. Why might that be? Well, for starters, the resistances and bloated HP of your foes make the cards often less impactful than what's written down, meaning cards just by themselves are just not gonna cut it. The power curve in ATO is distributed into 4 different factors, with the other 3 playing no small part in your character's power scaling. Said 3 factors are also very much within the player's grasp and control. Perks are completely under the player's control, and they are constantly made aware of the progress towards the next talent, and there's more opportunities and methods provided to attain your desired gear. As such, the cards need to remain toned down within reason, or they'll compound excessively with the other factors and trivialize the game's difficulty altogether. And since the gameplay is enriched by mechanics besides the cards, it's not a problem that cards are balanced this way. STS's power curve is distributed into only 2 factors alongside the occasional potions. The issue here is that relics are locked behind many RNG hoops. There is little control over the relics you get despite them playing a major role in your runs. If ATO's card balance philosophy was followed and cards were designed to mostly gain their strength from synergies with non-card mechanics, it would just make the game frustrating. It would feel less like a roguelike and more like a series of rigged dice rolls trying to get lucky and get the good relics that synergize because that'd be the only way to have a build take off. To avoid that frustrating gameplay loop, Megacrit intuitively made their cards have more in them so that they don't rob too much of the player's agency in constructing their builds. Speaking of nothing better to secrete that dopamine than seeing a card's name change color to something that's not white. Upgrades in Slay the Spire are primarily delivered through the smithing choice of a rest site, but rest sites are in and of themselves limited within a run. There are also occasional events and relics that allow card upgrades. Almost all cards can only be upgraded once, so the choice lies in what you should upgrade, in which order, and whether you should even be upgrading to begin with. It's okay, I'm only on the brink of passing over to the Shadow Realm. I can afford another card upgrade. This way of handling upgrades keeps it nice and simple. It avoids being overwhelming while still harboring a deceiving degree of depth to it. And since upgrades often compete with the player's standard method of healing, it makes for plenty of high-risk, high-reward situations. Enter Across the Obelisk. Simplicity? What for? That's baby stuff, man. Don't mind us, just gonna casually add 3 upgraded versions for almost every single card in this game. Nobody likes coconut flavor, but thankfully, there's always bananas and blueberries. ATO's approach to card upgrades is to give you 2 variants, each focusing on a different aspect of the card or sometimes introducing new effects altogether. Look at Life Tap, for example. The whole concept of the card is the common self-damage cliche of exchanging HP for some kind of benefit. In this case, it's HP for 1 energy. The yellow variant increases the damage in exchange for increasing the energy gained, effectively giving the mage more leeway with their energy in exchange for putting a bit more strain on the healer and or tank to keep up so they don't just off themselves with a heart attack in the middle of combat. Or you can pick the blue variant, which reduces the HP cost of using the card, meaning this is the safer pick. Every single class card in the game has yellow and blue variants designed in this manner to facilitate loads of decision making. You do lose that snappiness and briefer process that STS offers, further lengthened by the number of characters you have to do this for and the usage of a currency rather than rest sites to pay for the upgrades. That means there's way more upgrades to do, especially when you're playing solo, but there does come a new kind of fun in sitting at the drawing board and deliberating over which benefit tickles your fancy. Where STS lets the difficulty of its decision making vary based on your prior choices and luck, ATO lays out a full plethora of choices for you to sift through. Oh, you think it's just the addition of one extra variant? Oh, no. It only gets more convoluted from here. Should bananas and blueberries not sate one's appetite for cardly power, they shall seek the corrupted Concord grapes. They're called corrupted cards, but let's just agree to refer to them as purple, yeah. Purple cards are often the strongest variant of a card, usually taking the best of both worlds or even surpassing that. Going back to that life tap example, the purple variant has both the lower HP cost from the blue variant and the increased energy yield from the yellow variant combined into one. It sounds too good to be true, and you'd be right. There's a couple of catches to purple cards. Firstly, you can't get those by regular upgrading. They are only provided by being real lucky in your card rewards or through very specific events. Secondly, the brightest candles are the fastest to snuff out, the tastiest foods disappear first, and the angriest Grookleys are the most likely to die by hemorrhaging blood. If the analogies aren't doing it for you, then let me ask you this. You know what exhaustion is, right? It's a property of which its presence is indicated on the cards of both games. When you use an exhaustible card, that card is gone for the rest of the fight, and you don't get it back in your deck until you're done with said fight. You see where I'm going with this, eh? That's right, big fella, every purple card is exhaustible, regardless of whether the other variants were or weren't. Purple cards are so good, they're already gone on first use. It's not a secret that upgrades are available in abundance for your 4 characters in ATO, while they are closer to a scarcity in STS. But purple cards are one of Dreamsight's ways of injecting that special array of lucky moments when you get something real good, while maintaining good balance of the game by making these lucky finds exhaustible. Good for you, Dreamsight. Good for you. Now make purples not exhaust, you sons of— While we're on the topic of abundance and scarcity, let's talk about card rarities. STS distributes its cards into starters, commons, uncommons, and rares. ATO's rarity categories are commons, uncommons, rares, epics, and mythics. Brace yourselves, folks, I'm about to hit you with some of the most terrifying knowledge man has come to learn, and that is math! But for cards. In a video game. Here's the table showing the drop rates for cards from different sources in STS. Looks simple enough. We move to ATO now, right?
No.
You see, these are the base rarity chances. In reality, the chances of getting rares and commons changes every time you roll one or the other. With the exception of boss combats where rares are always guaranteed no matter what, the other card drop rates always start with a shared offset of -5% to the rares. Instead of sending rare chances to the negatives, it'll reduce the chance of an uncommon card and increase the chance of a common, so the sum of probabilities adds up to 100%. This offset changes and raises the chance for a rare by 1% every time you roll a common in a card reward, up to a maximum of plus 40%. When the chance for a rare increases, the chance for a common decreases in return. As soon as you roll a rare, the offset goes all the way back to the start. And yes, this means it will also get reset upon beating a boss, since you technically did roll rares even though those were guaranteed regardless. Like I mentioned before, this offset is shared between the different methods of getting rares, meaning that if you roll commons in a normal combat, the chance of rares increases for elite combats and shops too. Shops are an interesting case, as they will take into account the offset when determining what card rarities they will have, but rolling a rare or common card does not change or reset the offset at all. Nifty information all in all, but there's more. While it is impossible to get upgraded cards as card rewards in Act 1, there is a fixed 25% chance of rolling an upgraded card in Act 2, followed by a fixed 50% chance of that in Act 3. However, if you roll rare cards, it is impossible for them to come already upgraded. If your brain's already hurting, then too bad.
Get ready, mortal fool. Across the obelisk will shatter your feeble mind and leave you questioning your intelligence. Here comes the most advanced quantum mathematics for a card battler you've ever seen. Behold!
What? I couldn't find anything on drop rates, alright? There's really... Well, what do you want me to do? Message the developers directly so they can just hand me that secret information on a silver platter? Hey Rin, can you tell me everything about card drop rates? Asking for a friend. Despite my inability to data mine information or approach a modder about this topic, there are still obvious trends in how ATO treats card rewards. The two most notable things is that you can get upgraded cards from the get-go, and that card rewards have a curve where the rarities of what you roll continuously improve as you get deeper into a run. You are also rewarded with better cards based on how quickly you finish your fights. As for any specific information or numbers, I honestly couldn't tell you just yet. It might take me quite a while to obtain that information, and I need this video out sometime this month. Look, I have expectations to fulfill, okay? So we'll put a pin on that topic and take a deeper dive into it some other time. Don't worry though, I'm not done being a nerd yet. If we're talking specifics, we gotta talk about card categories. Most of them are typical, and sometimes really on the nose. If it does direct damage, it's an attack. If it doesn't do direct damage, it's a skill. This card comes from the healer pool of cards. It does healing. The card name literally says heal. I wonder what kind of card this could be. Ah, a healing spell? Clearly there was no way I could have known that. Both games use card types in the same way most card battlers and dueling games do, to create a network of synergies and to have the effectivity of some cards or mechanics be based on the types of other cards that you have. But amongst all of those are a kind of cards that brand their game with that unique flavoring to the combat. Slay the Spire's powers and Across the Obelisk's enchantments. And man, they are good. Powers are the STS player's way of playing the long game in a fight. These cards are investments that pay off later, escalating your gameplay and bringing those fabled broken decks to life, although it's not always easy. Powers are generally expensive energy-wise, and playing them often has no immediate benefit. This means that setting up a power can mean eating more damage from an enemy or missing out on dealing damage to said enemy. On top of that, the more a power's setup is delayed, the less value you get out of it. The lack of healing mid-combat, the luck of the draw, and the limitations of your energy place more weight on your decisions with powers, meaning it's just one more factor that needs you to adapt to the situation at hand. ATO's enchantments are not rewarded through fights or shops like STS, but rather they come straight from the characters themselves, with each one's enchantments customized to synergize with their strengths. Enchantments are cheap, deck control is more accessible, and you have a healer, tank, or both to buy you time for your setup. They don't suffer the same problems as STS powers. Instead, enchantments are more short-term, as they come with a certain amount of uses or duration before they're gone for good. Of course, they are exhaustible, so it's a once-per-fight kind of deal. If they're not long-term powers, then what do they do? Well, it depends on the enchantment. The benefits include, but are not limited to, Burst, just a lot of something all at once, like Andrin's Maneuver giving him evasion, or Magnus's Thunderclap giving him lightning damage from out of left field, Failsafing, for when things go wrong, such as Heiner's Steelforge or Reginald's Holy Symbol, Utilities, so that you can benefit your team, such as Thul's Deadly Strikes or Evelyn's Enchant Weapons, and of course, the most widespread and straightforward usage of them all, Catalyzing Setup. Fancy English vernacular, I know. What does this even mean? Take the following scenario with Grookley as an example. How did it get to this point? Why did Archon Nier schedule a no-stop flight to Pluto? Is it canon that Cornelius has dementia? And what could have possibly made Grookley seethe with this much rage?
Next up, we've got Gurkley. Wow, it's been a while since I played him. Is definitely in the only damage tier. I don't think it's good. Gurkley definitely feels like the worst, and not very great at the other stuff that's going on.
Oh, so it was Scrage's fault all along. But back to the original question, the simple answer is setup. Some characters and builds need to set up their things beforehand, whether it's their buffs or their debuffs or a certain Yu-Gi-Oh card sequence before they can come out swinging. As such, many enchantments help speed up the process. In Grookley's case, Grudge speeds up his Fury gain so he can reach that threshold of fatal damage faster. There are downfalls to using enchantments, of course. Since using them is effectively blowing your load all at once rather than being a long-term investment, the benefits are more volatile. Powers and debuffs are difficult to remove in STS, so there is less risk of getting hard countered and having your power's value just become null and void. ATO enchantments themselves can't be removed by foes, but it's much easier to dispel and purge statuses. Oh, would you look at that? That's what most enchantments do. Reckless play means that in a moment's notice, poof, all your enchantments work, vaporized in a matter of frames. While enchantments don't necessarily lose value from being delayed, their benefits can still be neutered by unlucky draws or even the fight ending before you get a good opportunity to use them. But hey, the players always find a way. Now this is all rad stuff, Mr. Vertclad, but what about starter decks? The way both games have designed starter decks is pretty clever, and they work as a subtle teaching tool. For veteran players, starter decks are a sore sight for the eyes, but for newbies, it gives them a hint as to what their character is good at. Strikes and defense are shared across all characters in STS. They're just basic as can be offense and defense. But what stands out is how each character starts with one or two unique cards. Silent, for example, has Neutralize and Survivor. The former hints at Silent's proficiency for slamming enemies with debuffs, and the latter hints at her capability for deck control. It nudges you in a direction, but doesn't spoil the learning curve by giving you all the answers. Enter ATO. Again, Dreamsight is too good for subtlety. They just wave big signs at their new players and say, "Hey you! Yeah you, fish for brains. You see this old man dressed in red? He's got fire drawn on his sleeves and robe. Literally has a fire staff. There's fire on his shoulders. Two of his skins are literally called Pyromancer and Inferno. It literally says he's a Pyromancer under his name. You see all these fire cards? You see how his fire resistance is the highest one? The fire guy is good at fire. Capiche? Now informed and educated about his strengths that he could have never figured out for himself, Cornelius would enter the forge and craft nothing but frost spells. Each and every character has their own unique starter deck, and they couldn't be any more blatant about which character is good at what, while at the same time leaving plenty to be discovered. Just like STS, each of ATO's characters has a unique starter card, and they serve the same purpose, to point at and contribute to something the character is good at or would benefit from having. Take Grookley, again, as an example. His Vigorous Fury gives him more fury, duh, but then it goes to give him Vitality as well. Why Vitality specifically? Mainly because there's a perk that allows Grookley to dispel his Fury-sourced bleeding every time he gains Vitality, regardless of who gives it to him. You can go from bleeding your whole body inside out to being completely fine with just one card. Wowee, this is all very cool, Mr. Vertronald McDonald. How do I get these cards you speak so fondly of? In STS, it'll be primarily card rewards from fights and in shops that sell them for gold, though there are certain events and relics that give those too. If you don't like a card you see, well, besides that one relic, you get no consolation prizes. Skipping too many card rewards usually leaves you with a half-baked build or no synergies at all, a crime punishable by death, because once again, STS wants you to adapt to your circumstances, and it will punish you when you can't, so don't be a stick in the mud, try new things out. In ATO, cards are primarily sourced from card rewards, divinations, and the Forge, the latter two being facilities found in the towns at the start of every act. If you don't like a card you see, you can pick shards instead. You effectively recycle your bad luck into crafting the cards you want. That's what the Forge is for. The Forge lets you craft cards, but with a restriction on how many, and higher rarity cards are obviously more expensive. Under the assumption that you have no town upgrades, you can craft up to 2 of each common and uncommon card starting from Act 1, 1 of each rare card starting from Act 2, and 1 of each epic card starting from Act 3. Mythics cannot be crafted, and you need to get them through card rewards or divinations late into the game. These card count restrictions do not refresh on entering a new town, obviously to limit players from breaking the game, so you'll have to make do for the whole run. If you run out of shards in a town and still need more cards, you can use your other currency, gold, to conjure a divination. A divination is effectively just another card reward, but you don't have to fight for it. The more you pay, the better and the more options you get. Well, okay, Mr. Vert Reginald, I know how to get these cards, but what colors of cards can I get? Well, it depends on your character, God bless your soul, Apen, Deus Volt, etc, etc. STS ones each have a pool of colored cards corresponding to them. If you play as that character, then your card rewards, upper row of the shop, and certain events will only provide you with cards from that character's pool of cards. There are a couple of ways to get cards from the other pools, but those are very rare exceptions, not the norm. In the interest of not overcomplicating their game, Megacrit has chosen to keep each character's pool to themselves by default. Instead of getting wrapped up in a mess of about 300 cards every time you play, the game's simplicity is favored, and each character is instead made to have their own set of archetypes, playstyles, and difficulty curves. Card pools for ATO are not based on your character, but rather what class your character falls under, the 4 classes being Warrior, Rogue, Mage, and Healer. DLC characters are not exempt from the system, and Yager falls under the Warrior class. Besides Wilbur's Twin Scrolls, it's not possible to have one class's cards mixed with another's. This is so characters are not just restricted to what they're good at, while also making sure to not break the game's balance. It allows the players to have more creativity beyond what was intended for any given character. Just because your rogue isn't Gustav doesn't mean you can't have Song of Celerity to speed up your whole team with. But Mr. Vernelius, what about the universal card pools for both games? Ah yes, those. Statuses are detrimental cards often inflicted by certain enemies. The thing about statuses is that they're temporary to the fight you got them from, meaning that once you fight the pesky schmuck that shoehorned them into your deck to begin with, you'll get rid of the statuses as well. Curses often come from events, and they're worse because they carry over between fights. Their effects can sometimes be worse than the statuses. The detriments of harboring them in your deck accumulates the longer you have them, and they require an active effort from the player to get them removed. Finally, we have colorless cards, usually found in shops or events. Like curses and statuses, any character can get them, except they're beneficial cards to have in your deck, ranging anywhere from little damage and block to being bougie and curing upgrade hunger. ATO has injuries, effectively just like STS curses, and mainly sourced from failing events. One notable difference is that injuries always exhaust upon being drawn, though that doesn't make them any less annoying to deal with considering they still clog your draw. If you succeed a fight but have one of your characters die, they will be given a Death's Door, probably the worst injury the game has to offer. On draw, you are weakened for 1 turn. Weakened as in all your damage and healing is cut in half. It's still removable, but it serves as punishment for when you fail to keep everyone alive, but getting an injury for the member that perished is better than just ending your whole run right then and there, so we take those. ATO also has boons, also sourced from certain events or succeeding them. Boons have a minor benefit that is immediately applied on draw, and they always draw you an extra card, so they don't clog your draw, making them exclusively beneficial for your heroes. There's a couple of niche exceptions where having certain boons is actually bad, but as long as you actually study your boons and events, you'll be fine. And thus concludes our analysis for the day, starring 2 tier lists, one from Grukli's arch nemesis and the other from the Charizard with Jaundice. To the remaining 2 of you that made it to this point of the video, thank you for watching. I want to off myself. This took a lot of time. I apologize for how long it took. If you like it, and you want to see more, just like, subscribe, rewatch, you know, do whatever, make it known. If you were here for DRG content, I have something coming. Don't worry. I have nothing else to say. It's 1:20 a.m. Bye.